All right. What I've decided to do is for your last set of assignments, whatever you want to call them, in the Java part of the class, I'd like you to turn in the first 2 tests correct. Okay? If you've already got them correct, and there's at least a couple in here who do, then you don't have any assignments. You get 100 for that too. But for the rest of you who have lost a lot of points on one or on both tests, it will not only give you a chance to make up some of those points, it will also hopefully help you to understand what's going on. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm not going to start from scratch. I'm going to show you my end product, but I'll show you how I did everything. Does that make sense? All right. Because we spent quite a bit of time on that first test. You know, it's out there on the YouTube channel if you want to watch that, if that helps. But my hope is we'll talk about this till no later than 1:30 or so. Then I'm going to give you the rest of the period to work on it. Then I'm going to ask people, did you get it done? And if it's tomorrow and you didn't get them both done, then I'm going to give you tomorrow to work on it. And then Wednesday, either tomorrow or Wednesday, depending on how people are doing, we'll start on the Android stuff. Oh, and I forgot. I got to tell Charles, too, about that one monitor. I forgot to tell him that. I only saw him for a second this morning. So, all right. So, taking this from the top, make your bank account class abstract. Keep all of the following instance variables. So you were supposed to have 1, 2, 3 instance variables and an abstract initial deposit. And what I'm trying to show you is, and I'm going to bounce back and forth between this stuff as we're going on in here. But for the bank account class, what that meant was, first of all, public class abstract. Should have said that. If you used an interface file, then you should have implemented the interface file. Does all that make sense? All right. You were supposed to have these 3 variables in there. A string for the first name, a string for the last name, and int for the account number. You are also supposed to have in there at the bottom someplace probably this public abstract method. All right? As long as you have that in there, that was your first 5 points. Now, the way that I set up and put in all of my try-catch statements, that's why I needed these throws in here. Okay? Just so you're aware of that. Because it was possible with the initial deposit, it was possible to have one that was less than $100 for the savings, less than $10 for the Christmas club, and less than $250 for the checking, or whichever the heck that was. What I'm asking you is, does that make sense? What you'll find is when you're working on this, if you leave these off, you're going to get an error either in this file or in one of the classes that attempt to use this file. Okay? Oh, as always, you know this. With some of you, when I ran your program, it literally did come up here. And in the box here, it showed me that you had errors. All right? Now, what were the errors? It depended on the person. Okay? Did you have your hand up, Colin?
Yeah. On your abstract method, why did you count the double input?
Right here?
Yeah, the double input.
Oh, that's the initial deposit. That's ID, initial deposit. It wasn't an account number or anything.
Well, I know.
That was just, I just said I was going to pass an initial deposit into that. Okay? And again, that's just the way that I wrote it. I'm not saying that the way I wrote it was the best way there is or the only way there is. I'm just going to tell you that's the way that I wrote it. To be honest with you, on mine, I would have lost points on mine because I forgot to implement the thing for the interest. I just didn't do it. It was one of those things, I'm going to go back and do it, and then I never did. All right? But what I'm asking is, for what I've shown you so far, does everything make sense? All right, so that was just the first 5 points of the test. Then, keep the 2 bank account class constructors and change as shown. The no-arg should set the first name to UFN, the last name to ULN, and a random account number, all right, or a random number for the account between 1,000 and 10,000. So for that one, if we go to the BankAccount.java, and again, I'm just saying this because I'm just telling you the way that it is. Where's my full arg? No, there's the no arg. All right, so the no arg constructor, again, I just set the stuff in here directly. I didn't care if you, instead of doing this, if you wanted to call the set first name and the set last name and pass in an empty string, that was okay. All right. And this I call set account number, and I passed in 0. Why? Because what happens in the account number is it's generating that random number in there. Again, all I'm telling you is this is the way I decided to do it. All right? So if you said, well, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? And I know Ethan and I were having a talk about this last week. I can't always tell you why I do things. All right? I mean, sometimes I'm just sitting there and I'm programming away and I don't even think about it. I kind of get into some weird mode until I start running it and I start getting errors. Then I go back and think about what I'm doing and why I did it. That's all. Yeah.
Do exceptions in no-arg?
Pardon?
On your no-arg constructor, do you exceptions? Are you supposed to, or do you need to?
That's on the set. And the question was for right here. Okay? And the reason I did that was what happened with mine is, did I have to do it? No. No. And you could have actually made a case to say it would have been cleaner to not do that. Because the way that I've got it set up, when I tried throwing when I tried to instantiate an object with nothing in it for all those defaults, all it did was throw the first exception. See what I'm saying? So I really probably should have left these out. All right? That's why I said, are there better ways of doing it than the way I did it? Definitely. All right? So here was the full arg constructor. Again, set first name and pass it to first name, set last name and pass it to last name, set account number, and again, I just passed it 0. But since I've got an account number, I really shouldn't have done that. I should have said account number. See, I find errors in my own stuff as I go through it. All right? So the question is, between this no arg and this full arg constructor, are there any questions? That was the easiest part to grade on here, because you did it or you didn't. A couple of you left off a constructor. You lost the points. You know, you think, well, that isn't fair. I don't know any other way to show you, because when it says here, put a no arg constructor in, and it tells you what to do, and it's worth 5 points, and you don't do it at all, I can't give you any points. This one, I think everybody did. All right? Now, create setters and getters for each of the 3 above. So you know you're going to have a get first name, set first name, a get last name, set last name, a get account number, set account number. Does that make sense? That was also worth 5 points. First name and last name cannot be blank. Account number must be within this range. And it said right there, generate exceptions for violations. The one thing I'm finding, you know, and it never ceases to amaze me. If I don't put something in, even if I talk, this is going to be on the test and you got to do this, but if I don't put it on the test, I'll have people who will argue with me. It wasn't on there. All right. Now I've got to give a test. I got to give a retest tomorrow for the first year people. They were all, pardon my French, but pissing and moaning because they didn't like the test review page that I gave them for the test they took today. They said there were too many questions that I didn't put on the test review page that were on the test. And how do I know that? Because 5 people took the test. 3 people didn't just get F's, but they failed miserably. And the 2 people who passed got low C's. So maybe it was me. But I also told them, gee, could it be that maybe that information was in the book and no one read it? Because I think so. All right, so that was number 1, number 2, and number 3. As far as the getters and setters go, again, probably they just make sense. The getters, I didn't do anything special. Boom, return, boom, return, boom, return. All right, and for the setters, I did them like this. Again, I said if there was no first name in there, throw the blank first name exception. All right. Now, I don't need an else because it's either thrown the exception and it's gotten the heck out, or, bless you, it's going to set it. And the last name was exactly the same, except instead of saying FN, I said LN. Okay? And for the account number, again, I couldn't remember how to do this. So all I ended up doing in here was going out and Googling how to create a random number within a range in Java. And I used one of the first things I found from there. That literally says between 1,000 and 10,000. And again, since I'm generating the number here, this should never technically be hit. All right, but I said generate exceptions for violations, so to try to be complete, I put it in there. All right, any questions on any of those 3 getters or those 3 setters? All right, then the next part of the test here said create 3 additional classes that extend the bank account class. So let's just take them in order. You were supposed to do a savings account class. That initial deposit that we set up as an abstract function in our bank account class should guarantee that the initial deposit is a minimum of $100. All right? Again, I didn't add the method for the interest rate. That's on me. Okay? The balance cannot go below 100. Use constants to express these values whenever possible. Again, I was hoping that people would use an interface file. Probably about half of you did, and about half of you didn't. It didn't say specifically use an interface file, so if you didn't do it, I didn't take a point off. But again, it's just a wise thing to be doing. Putting all of your constants in a certain, the same locale, for lack of better words. Keep track of the number of deposits, the number of withdrawals, the total deposit amount, the total withdrawal amount, and the current balance. All right, so let's take a look at those. We'll start with the savings account, like I said. So here's the savings account. Again, extends bank account. You needed to say extends in there because that's what made the magic happen, so to speak. All right, that's what made the magic happen for the inheritance. Since I used an interface file, I needed to implement it. Does all that make sense? And the stuff that's in here, if you look right there, that should have been in all 3 of the accounts, because all 3 of the different classes had an initial deposit, had a current balance, had a total number of deposits, had a total deposit amount, had a total number of withdrawals, and had a total withdrawal amount. Does that make sense? All right. And, I mean, you're to the point now, you're all intelligent people in here. Some of you may not agree with that, but I think you're all intelligent people. All right. This should always be an int. When you're asking, that's an accumulator. How many deposits did you make? You can't make 3.8 deposits. It doesn't make sense. You can't make 6.2 withdrawals. Those should be ints. All right. And it's just to the point right now, is that being nitpicky? No. That's just doing things the right way. Period. But these balance, the deposit itself, the total deposit amount, the total withdrawal amount, those should be doubles. All right. So here was the savings account So here was the savings account constructor. All right. One of the things you were told in here is you had to call super. You had to have the first name, the last name, and the account number handled by the bank account class. Does that make sense? All right. And again, I've tried to make sure, if you say, well, I don't get this, we did the thing with the payroll. It really wasn't all that different than this. All right. And again, since I was putting that up there, I could have had any of these kind of errors. What's going to differ on all of these is this one, since it's the savings account, I can have that kind of an exception. When I get to checking account, I'll have that kind of exception, but for checking account. When I get to the Christmas club, it'll have that kind of exception, but for the Christmas club. All right? All right. And so I called super, then I called set initial deposit. So let's look at that. This is, again, this kind of just weirded me out, for lack of better words. Some of you did this stuff correctly, but put it on the top. You put it before your check. So you were allowing anything to take place, whether it was a negative number, whether it was some number that would have put you out of range, didn't matter. This has got to be after that. All right, this was the initial deposit. If the initial deposit was less than the minimum, which was 100 or 250, I don't care. But if it was less than that, we were going to throw the exception. Otherwise, boom, there's your initial deposit. The current balance would be equal to the initial deposit. Some of you too, again, like I said, you are all smart people. You're all smart enough to realize that's how much you started with. All right? This is a running total. So when you first start, you set this equal to this when you first start, because that's how much money you put in to begin with. Some of you didn't do that. All right? And then you add 1 to your total number of deposits, and you take that amount from the initial deposit, and you add that to your total deposit amount. Does all that make sense? Because I'm serious. If you've got questions, please ask. The get was, that's just it. Boom, just the get. All right. So you had a deposit method and you had a withdrawal method. With the deposit, as long as it was greater than 0, I said, yep, add that deposit to the current balance, add 1 to your total number of deposits, take that deposit amount and add that to your total deposit amount. All right? So that was what I did there. Question?
You didn't put a withdrawal or a withdrawal in your constructor?
Well, I looked at it, not to be funny, but you have to have money in first.
Right.
So the constructor is when you're kind of starting out.
And I think for more like error checking, it would fail.
Okay. Here's the withdrawal method. The withdrawal amount had to be greater than 0, because you can't withdraw something negative. And if you took the current deposit and you subtracted the withdrawal from it, you had to make sure you still had the minimum. And as long as both those conditions were met, then you take your current deposit, your current balance, and subtract the withdrawal amount from it. You add 1 to your total withdrawals, and you add that withdrawal amount to your total withdrawal amount. Again, does that make sense? And that was it. What you're going to find is when we go next, and we go from here to the checking account, again, I am missing in mind. I want you to put it in, but I am missing that thing for interest. Make the interest as simple as you can. I think 1 or 2 of you, I know, Evan, you did it, and it worked fine. But yours was, I think your whole routine was like 4 or 5 lines. It's not like you have to type a lot. Yes. But I didn't know that.
I was confused on interest because how are you calculating time?
That's what I said. Make it, if you want, just say it's 2% over an entire year. So just take their ending amount when you're all done and call that. Yes. Because otherwise, like you said, when you get into time increments and the like, there's too much to do. You could easily take a program that's a few hundred lines and make it a few thousand lines. That was not the intention. All right, so here's the checking account. Look here. The same exact stuff. All right? Look here. The same exact stuff. The only thing that's different is now it's a checking deposit exception that you can throw. All right? Again, it's super. Again, it's a call. Again, the getter is the same. The setter is really the same, except you're checking a different amount and throwing a different exception. I tried to write this, and I'm not going to lie to you, I grabbed all the code after I wrote the first one and copied it to the other two and just made minimal changes to it. But before I did that, I made sure the first one worked rather than just sitting there and, oh, got it done, copy it. No, I tried it with a few examples to make sure it worked. And once it did, then I did all the copies because the rest of this is the same. That's exactly the same as the deposit in the other one. All right? That's exactly the same as the withdrawal in the other one. Now, if it turns out, and I want you to hear this, if it turns out that you can be 100% assured, let's just assume for whatever reason, withdrawals and deposits always work identically for every single kind of account. You literally can go and write methods in an interface file that are not abstract methods. You can write regular methods in an interface file. You can do that. There's nothing illegal about doing it. So if we knew that all the deposits, all the et cetera, were always going to be the same, they're not. But if they were, we could have written it in there. All right. The idea is what you want to do is you don't want to be always replicating code all over the place. All right. So when you go through this is part of understanding object-oriented programming and class design. All right. Is trying to write code where you're not doing a ton of duplication. All right, so that was the same for that one. And then we had the Christmas Club account. You have a question? Oh, okay. And again, when you look, extends bank account, implements iBank account, exactly the same. Here we have a different exception on the bottom we're throwing, but the rest of it's the same. This is exactly the same. This is exactly the same, all right? And this is the same except, again, I'm checking a different constant, so I'm throwing a different exception too, all right? But my hope was, that you would see this. The deposit is the same. The withdrawal is the same. I was hoping that you'd get that, and you'd probably be finished with the test in an hour, maybe even if you tested the hell out of it, 2 hours. All right. So that was part A, the savings account class, and that was 15 points. Part B, the checking account class, and that was 15 points. And part C, the Christmas Club account, and that was 15 points. So that was 45% of the test were those three classes. You already know, because we looked at this earlier, 5, 5, 5, 5. So 20% of the test was numbers 1, 2, and 3. 45% of the test was number 4. And then we came down to when we were into the driver stuff. All right? So notice, just creating the driver and making at least a test for a savings account, a checking account, a Christmas Club. All right, you should have been testing all the conditions. You're going to see in mine, it just got too big. So what I did was rather, I put about a third of them in. I had them all in, but I started pulling them out because it was just like this. All right. Now, as it says, in the driver for each one, you should have overridden the toString method. The funny thing is, I don't know if any of you, well, I shouldn't say that, but very few of you did this. What you should have done first in toString is called super.toString. You should have done that. But a lot of you just replicated the same stuff again and again and again. Why did you do that? I don't know. If you call super, it should do that stuff for you, and you're calling the same routine once, as opposed to you typing in 3 lines and 3 lines and 3 lines of code. All right. Then in the constructor for each one of these, again, as it said, make sure you correctly call super. We already talked about that. And then this optional extra credit, create a single array. That wasn't really very different from what you did in the last test, to be honest with you. Because in my rationale behind that was, okay, it's, you're coming to the end of class. And Amin says, I'm done, and I know I got most of this right. I'd really like to pick up another 10 points. So that maybe you would look at that one in the last half hour or so and try to implement that. So for my bank account driver, here it is. Again, it's just a big succession of try catches. All right, and when I run this, I get some junk here because that wasn't exactly implemented correct, but that was on me. So you can see, this column, this is what you asked about. If I had not put in that at the beginning, for the no-R constructor, if I had not put any throws in there, that wouldn't be there. All right, so yeah, it would have been cleaner to do it that way. This, I set up one, and I left off the first name, I left off the last name. I can't spell, but you can see the initial deposit for savings, out of range, for checking, out of range, for Christmas Club, out of range. All right, so that was the idea. That's what I was looking for. All right, as far as, because I don't know, one of you over there I think asked me this question, and it was a very good question, a very fair question, and that was, geez, Jeff, how many of these frickin' exceptions should we have? This is how many I had. So I had 1, 2, 3, 4. Probably I should have had at least 3 more. I should have had an out of range. So notice what I have here. This is initial checking, initial Christmas, and initial savings. I should have had one for a withdrawal and a deposit for each one of those. So I could check those out of range things. Because if you're going to take the time to make this, you really, and this was everything, right? Basically, you should take the time to make sure all those are checked. All right? Why write exceptions? Why have these if you're not going to write exceptions to make sure and have exception handlers and test it to make sure that indeed if I try to put in something that's out of range or whatever, or if it falls lower than a certain thing, that kind of stuff should be checked. Yeah. Yes. I didn't care how you did it. All right. What got me was, I think sometimes if I tell you to do it exactly like this, people fixate on that and then they spend too much time on that when I'd rather just have them, I didn't care is what I'm telling you. If you wanted to do that, that would have been fine. If you didn't want to do that, you wanted to just manually do it, that would be fine. Either way. Are there any questions on anything that I just went over? All right, so I'm going to give you, this is your next assignment then. This is the last one, so if you look here, and I don't want to pull up anybody's stuff, I never want to do that. But I should be able to go here, and here, here, and then hit coursework. Yeah. So, everybody has finished the first hands-on test. Everybody did the chapter 2 through 6 exercises. Everybody did the second hands-on test. Everybody did the chapter 6 through 9 exercises. Tiffany is doing right now the exam. That's her right there, the one ungraded. All right, so this one right here, and I'm going to change the point value, do it before your very eyes, because I know it'll be like, wow. I'm making that 100 points. But I expect for you to get 100 points, A, they all have to work, and B, you have to, follow the instructions for everything that was on both of the tests. And if you do that, it's like you're getting 50 points back from your first test, and then 50 points back from your second test. All right? And there's at least 2 people in this room right now that aren't going to have to do a flaming thing, and they've already got the 100 points. You're not getting extra credit, all right? But you get the points. And I'm going to give you the rest of the period today, and then about 4 o'clock or so, I'll say, how are people doing? And I'd like to have it in by Wednesday. Why? Because Wednesday I want us to start the new stuff. I don't want it where any of you are still working on this when we're getting into the new stuff. Does that make sense? All right. And when you come in here on Wednesday, I don't know what we're going to do with that other one. If nothing else, I'll let you use mine. I don't care. All right. It's not the same one, but it's. But I'd like us Wednesday. Some of you weren't here last Friday, and if you were not here, Mr. Wilson was nice enough that he set up everybody's tablets that we're going to use. So they're all ready to go, except one of them doesn't have any screen. But other than that, they're all ready to go. All right. So Wednesday is, and we're actually sitting really well because if you look, it says Unit 2. This unit begins on 2.6. Well, even if I give you tomorrow to finish up those tests, we're beginning it on 2.7. That isn't too bad. Now, if you look in here, whoops, looks like, again, what do we have? Some in-class exercises, some more in-class exercises, a hot, some in-class exercises, some in-class exercises, and a hot, some in-class exercises, and then a hot. My hope is what we're able to do is to go over chapters 1 through 4, 5 through 9, 13, 16, and 17. All right? Now, some of the stuff on 16 and 17, either 16 or 17, one of those 2 chapters is on how to submit something to the App Store. That won't be on a test. All right? But we will create the tip calculator that they do. We'll probably at least do a BMI or something else as a class, ideally a couple more things as a class. You shouldn't be surprised when you take the tests in here. You are going to be building an app incrementally. All right, I don't think that should surprise anybody. Okay. All right, any questions on anything that I just went over with you? You understand what you have to do in order to be able to get 100 points? Anybody who doesn't get that? Again, turn in working copies of the first bank account test and the second bank account test that meet the requirements that were in on both tests. You have hard copies of both tests, so you know what those requirements are. All right? So the rest of the period is yours. And like I said, around 4 or so, I'm going to ask how people are doing. And if you say, hey, we need one more period, then you're getting one more period. If you don't, you say, no, we can get it done by Wednesday. We don't need any more class time. Then we'll start tomorrow on the Android stuff. All right?